Good morning. This is Crystal Woods with Seasons of the Vine, and it's Fresh Friday. And last week I talked about the bondage of people pleasing and how we really need to make sure that we're not living for the acceptance or pleasure of other people, but that we're living for what God is saying to do, His acceptance and His pleasure over our lives. We have been bought at a price, and we do not belong to ourselves. We belong to God. And people pleasing interferes with that relationship that we have with the Lord, because what happens is we let other people dictate or speak in. And what that does is it just opens up a space for us to make decisions or choose to go certain ways or feel certain things that aren't from God at all. Jesus modeled so perfectly because He's Jesus. That's what He came to do. But He modeled for us what it was like to live only doing what the Father is doing. Jesus was very specific in who He listened to and who He was taking His orders from. And He modeled that for us so that we can grow in that kind of obedience and surrender as well. People pleasing, though, it gets in the way of that. It hinders that. So I was sitting at the table on Monday, and on the back of a check, I got this download about the detriment of people pleasing and what specifically it begins to attack. It attacks our obedience to God, our commitment to Him, our ability to do or do the things that He wants us to do despite other people's reactions. It can hinder us in just moving freely, because if we think, oh, well, if I go and do this, but people don't like it, oh no, we can tie our identity up into how people feel about us. And that is bondage. That's not a great thing. But what specifically the Lord was talking to me about this week was when we agree to do something because someone is asking us, or to live under the praise or approval of people, of man, and not God. We're actually giving authority to those people. We're actually taking the authority that God has over us and allowing someone else to hold that place. He is the creator. He made you, He made me, and He made us for a purpose and a reason. And when we let those purposes and reasons and other opinions infiltrate what God has said, we begin to live out of those things and we end up compromising. And so when we let others dictate and we obey what they desire over what God does, or even if we just rely on that, like we feel like God is saying this, but we still want to make sure that person's okay with us. When we do that, we're actually giving authority to them to speak over us. Like we should only have that authority from God speaking over us, but we give that to someone else. And we give that authority over. And suddenly we can use our authority, our decision making, what we're supposed to be doing for that person's desire and not God's, and God's alone. That is a very big trap. So where does your authority come from? Well, it comes from God. And how are you going to honor Him with what He has given you, what He has called you to? People pleasing will bump that off, and we may do things because that's how our families want us to do things, or our friends, or maybe we compromise at work because that's what people expect of us. Maybe the water cooler has become a gossip central because that's what's expected. And if I don't participate, they're going to start talking about me, right? We have to get comfortable living under what God has said and just letting us shine in the way that He wants us to shine, not in the way others do. We want to let Him be the authority over us. When I was thinking about authority, we don't have regular TV. We haven't had regular TV. Oh my gosh, maybe like 16, 17 years, maybe. It's been the majority of our marriage, for sure. I'm trying to think how old kids are. At least 17 years. So I don't see commercials because we don't really watch TV a lot. And yeah, anyway, but when I was a kid, I remember this commercial for Hebrew National hot dogs. And one of the things that they said was, We answer to a higher authority. I think that's roughly what their catchphrase is. We answer to a higher authority. And that was pretty cool because it's Jewish people saying, like, we put good things in our food because we don't answer to the world. We don't answer to current trends. We don't answer to what people want us to do. We answer to God. And because we answer to God, we answer to a higher authority. And that means we're going to live and do a certain thing with our hot dogs, but you can see how it parallels into our lives. And so one of the things we have to keep track of is we do answer to a higher authority. And that higher authority is our God, our Father, our Creator. He's the one that gets to decide how He wants to use us. He's the potter and we're the clay. But when we get on the wheel of someone who wants us to do things their way, whether it could even be tradition or religion, it could be a variety of things. Ask the Lord what it might be for you if you feel like you're struggling with this. It could even be like, this is just how my system does things. This is how we do it in my recovery group. This is how we do it in our holidays. All of that. This is just how we do it. That can take the clay from the potter's wheel and put it on another wheel. And then as you're being molded on that other wheel, you're becoming something that God didn't design you to become, or that He doesn't desire you to become. And that then is putting yourself under another authority. And we want to be under the authority of God. Jesus lived under the authority of His Father. He doesn't answer to the Pharisees. He didn't answer to the people. He answered to His Father. Occasionally, He would explain why He did something or say things like, Father, I know that you hear me, but we're doing this for the people to see our relationship. Isn't that beautiful? And there were those moments when you could see Him sitting under that authority and it was very visible. You could also see those moments where He tells the Pharisees and the scribes, like, I'm not going to tell you the authority that I preach in, that I do these signs and wonders in. He doesn't answer to them. They didn't answer His tricky question, and so He doesn't answer to them. He answers to a higher authority. Friends, we answer to a higher authority. And when people pleasing is a part of our life, we actually decide to answer to people pleasing. And that becomes the authority over our life. And we get our satisfaction and our fulfillment in when people like us. And we get our despair and our depression and our anxiety when people don't like us, or they don't respond to what we're doing in the way that we want them to. We're giving them authority over us, and we don't want to do that. So that was the download from the Lord this week, just a piggyback on people pleasing and whose authority are you going to live under? That is the harder question this week. Enjoy, have fun, and be free. Be free to live under what God is saying and not what people are saying. Unless the people are in alignment with God, then that's a great situation. But just make sure you're always fleshing it out with the Father. Your relationship with Him is very important.